Understanding emotional distance is a critical aspect of navigating healthy interpersonal relationships. Whether you're dealing with a friend, partner, family member, or even a colleague, recognizing when someone is pulling away emotionally requires both awareness and emotional intelligence. Unfortunately, many people misinterpret distance as a sign of rejection, failure, or personal inadequacy. This misreading often triggers a reactive response, such as chasing the person, overanalyzing the situation, or becoming overly self-critical, which can make the situation worse. By contrast, understanding emotional distance from an educational perspective gives you the tools to respond wisely, calmly, and constructively. To begin, it's important to understand that emotional distance doesn't always mean someone no longer cares. In many cases, people pull away temporarily for reasons that have little or nothing to do with us. Stress, internal conflict, burnout, or simply needing solitude are common causes. Imagine someone going through a difficult time. Perhaps they're overwhelmed with responsibilities or silently struggling with their mental health. In such cases, emotional distance can be a protective mechanism rather than a deliberate rejection. When we're not aware of this, we tend to personalize their behavior, which leads to unnecessary tension, miscommunication, and emotional burnout. This is why awareness and observation are key. When someone becomes distant, pay attention to patterns without immediately assigning blame. Are they less responsive to messages? Do they seem distracted in conversations? Have they stopped initiating contact or seem emotionally unavailable when you speak? These can be subtle but real indicators of emotional distance. However, the educational approach encourages you to observe without judgment. Don't immediately conclude that they are abandoning you. Instead, treat this as an opportunity to pause and assess the context of their behavior. Furthermore, understanding emotional distance requires you to reflect on the dynamic of the relationship as a whole. Ask yourself honest questions. Has the communication between you two changed recently? Have there been unresolved conflicts or emotional tensions that might explain the shift? Has life thrown them a curveball that might be taking up their mental and emotional bandwidth? When you frame their emotional distance as a data point in a larger pattern rather than an attack on your self-worth, you're much more likely to respond with wisdom and patience instead of panic or insecurity. In an educational context, it's helpful to view relationships like systems that fluctuate over time. Just as physical health can go through phases of energy and fatigue, so too can emotional connections. Recognizing this fluctuation doesn't mean you're ignoring red flags or allowing yourself to be mistreated. Instead, it's about distinguishing between temporary distance and long-term disconnection. Emotional maturity allows us to give people space without interpreting their behavior through a purely self-centered lens, and often giving someone that space without resentment or pressure creates the very conditions needed for reconnection. Another key element in understanding emotional distance is recognizing your own emotional needs and triggers. When someone pulls away, it often touches on deeper insecurities, fear of abandonment, fear of not being good enough, or fear of being unlovable. These fears can provoke a strong urge to chase after the person in an attempt to restore the connection or validate your worth. But educationally speaking, this is a valuable moment for self-inquiry. Why is their distance triggering you? What underlying beliefs are you holding about yourself that make this situation feel threatening? By turning inward and exploring these questions, you not only grow as a person, but also give yourself the power to respond from a place of inner strength, not emotional reactivity. Moreover, emotional distance can serve as a mirror for the relationship's health. It gives both parties space to reflect on what's working and what's not. Sometimes people pull away because they don't feel heard, valued, or respected. Other times, it's because they themselves are struggling and don't know how to ask for support. If and when a conversation happens, aim to approach it with curiosity rather than accusation. Say things like, "I've noticed you've seemed a bit distant lately, and I want to make sure you're okay," rather than, "Why are you ignoring me?" This creates safety and invites open dialogue. Understanding emotional distance also means acknowledging that we cannot control how others feel or behave. What we can control is how we interpret their behavior and how we choose to respond. It's tempting to want to fix things right away, to bring the person back closer to us, to restore harmony immediately. But sometimes the most loving thing you can do for both yourself and the other person is to wait, to trust the process, and to prioritize emotional responsibility over emotional urgency. Lastly, emotional distance doesn't always signal the end of a relationship. Sometimes it's a needed recalibration. In fact, it can be the beginning of a deeper, more authentic connection, if handled wisely. When we respond with patience, respect, and kindness, we demonstrate emotional integrity, and even if the distance leads to an eventual parting, we can walk away knowing that we honored our values, communicated with maturity, and respected the other person's journey. In summary, understanding emotional distance isn't about fearing loss, it's about recognizing the natural rhythms of human connection. It calls for self-awareness, empathy, and the ability to pause rather than pursue. It's a powerful lesson in emotional intelligence and one of the most important foundations of any healthy relationship. When someone begins to emotionally pull away from you, whether a friend, a romantic partner, or even a family member, our instinctive response might be to try and pull them back. It can feel like if we just try a little harder, if we reach out more, explain ourselves better, show them how much we care, they'll come back and everything will return to normal. But in most cases, chasing someone who is distancing themselves is not only ineffective, it's damaging. It puts you in an emotionally vulnerable position, places pressure on the other person, and often leads to a dynamic where your worth feels tied to their attention. From an educational perspective, it's essential to understand not just that chasing is unhelpful, but why it is and what beliefs often drive this behavior. When you chase someone, what you are really doing is trying to force connection. But connection, by its nature, has to be mutual. It requires two people who both want to be there, who both choose to be present. When one person begins to pull back and the other person starts to push forward, it creates imbalance. Instead of responding to the shift with self-awareness and space, chasing inserts urgency and emotional demand into a situation that usually needs reflection and calm. This often results in the other person pulling back even more, creating a cycle of pursuit and avoidance. Educational psychology teaches us that people need autonomy in their relationships. The moment someone feels emotionally cornered or pressured, their instinct is to retreat. This doesn't mean they don't care. It simply means that the pressure overrides their ability to process their own feelings. When you chase, you may believe you are showing love or dedication, but to the other person, it can feel like control, neediness, or desperation. And whether consciously or unconsciously, that tends to diminish attraction, connection, and trust. Another reason chasing is problematic is that it usually stems from fear of abandonment, rejection, or losing something that feels safe and familiar. But fear is not a solid foundation for healthy behavior. When fear drives our actions, we often abandon our own needs, values, and boundaries just to keep someone in our lives. We start doing things to prove our worth rather than expressing ourselves authentically. We overextend, over-apologize, over-communicate, and over-explain. But real connection doesn't require us to chase validation. It requires mutual recognition and respect. The right people don't need convincing to stay. In educational settings, particularly in emotional development programs, there's an important concept called secure attachment. Securely attached individuals understand that their worth is not defined by another person's presence or absence. They recognize that not all distance is a threat, and not all closeness is a guarantee. They know how to stay grounded in their own emotional space, even when relationships fluctuate. By contrast, chasing often reflects an insecure attachment pattern, one where a person seeks external reassurance to calm their internal fears. Learning to identify these patterns within yourself is the first step toward changing them. Chasing can also prevent necessary emotional clarity. When you constantly pursue someone who is pulling away, you may be filling the silence with your own effort, never giving them the space to show you their true intentions. Silence and distance can be painful, but they are also revealing. They show you who is willing to meet you halfway and who is not. If someone truly values your presence, they will eventually make that known, not because you chased them, but because they decided to show up. Giving people the space to choose is often the most respectful and powerful thing you can do, both for them and for yourself. There's also the question of self-respect. Chasing often means you are putting someone else's behavior above your own dignity. You are investing emotional energy into convincing someone to prioritize you, when that energy could be better spent building yourself, pursuing your goals, healing your emotional wounds, and fostering relationships that are reciprocal and uplifting. Education around emotional boundaries teaches that love should never cost you your peace, and loyalty should never come at the expense of your self-worth. Some might argue that persistence shows dedication, and to an extent that can be true in healthy mutual relationships. But there is a difference between healthy persistence and emotional chasing. Persistence involves effort within a framework of respect and boundaries. Chasing, on the other hand, is effort without boundaries. It often includes ignoring red flags, dismissing your own discomfort, and continuing to engage with someone who is not reciprocating. That is not strength, that is self-abandonment disguised as love. Finally, understanding why you shouldn't chase people helps shift your focus from trying to fix external situations to working on your internal growth. It invites you to develop emotional discipline, the ability to pause, reflect, and respond rather than react. It teaches you to value peace over people pleasing, and to recognize that being alone is far better than being in a one-sided emotional exchange. It helps you build a mindset where connection is based on choice, not compulsion, and where your energy is protected rather than scattered. In closing, the act of not chasing is not cold, unkind, or indifferent. It is mature. It is choosing to remain grounded when someone else becomes uncertain. It is understanding that your presence is a gift, not something to be negotiated. It is recognizing that true, healthy relationships don't need to be chased. They need to be nurtured, yes, but only when both people are present and willing. When you stop chasing, you start respecting. And in that space of respect, real connection has the chance to either return naturally or make room for something better. When someone begins to pull away, the emotional instinct to chase can be strong. However, as we've explored, chasing often backfires and leads to greater distance. So if we shouldn't chase, what should we do instead? This question is at the heart of emotional intelligence and maturity. Learning how to respond constructively when someone pulls away not only protects your self-worth but also invites healthier outcomes, whether that means reconnection or respectful closure. In this keynote, we'll explore alternative actions that are rooted in self-awareness, emotional discipline, and genuine respect for others' autonomy. The first and most important thing to do is pause. Emotional distance from someone can trigger deep-seated fears of abandonment, rejection, or loss. In these moments, your nervous system may respond with anxiety or panic, urging you to act, text, call, or fix the perceived disconnection. But those are reactive behaviors. Instead, pausing gives your mind space to regulate. It allows you to move from a place of emotional urgency to one of clarity. In educational psychology, this is the difference between reacting and responding. A reaction is instinctive and often fear-based. A response is thoughtful and grounded. The pause helps you move from one to the other. Next, redirect your attention inward. Ask yourself, why is this affecting me so deeply? Use this situation as a mirror. Often, what feels like rejection from another person is actually reflecting unmet needs or wounds within ourselves. Maybe it's a fear of being unwanted, of not being enough, or of being forgotten. When you can name and sit with these internal feelings instead of trying to fix them externally, you start to reclaim your emotional power. Instead of seeking validation from someone who is pulling away, you begin to validate your own feelings and affirm your worth independent of their actions. Another powerful thing to do instead of chasing is to maintain your dignity through emotional neutrality. This doesn't mean you shut down or pretend not to care. Rather, it means you stay grounded and present without swinging into emotional extremes. You resist the urge to beg, plead, or argue. You don't play games, send guilt, tripping messages, or try to manipulate a response. Emotional neutrality is a quiet strength. It says, I see the shift, I feel the change, but I remain centered. This approach communicates self-respect and gives the other person space to reflect without pressure. Simultaneously, shift your focus back onto your own life. Reinvest in the things that bring you joy, purpose, and confidence. This isn't about pretending you're unaffected. It's about remembering who you are outside of that relationship. When someone pulls away, it's easy to make them the center of your emotional universe, but doing so creates dependency. A healthier approach is to recenter yourself. Spend time with friends who support you, pursue goals that excite you, or engage in activities that nourish your soul. This refocus not only helps you feel stronger, it also often reminds the other person of the value you bring without you needing to prove anything. Also, consider opening up a calm, respectful line of communication, but only once you've grounded yourself emotionally. If it feels appropriate and the relationship is important to you, it's okay to express your observations and intentions. You might say something like, I've noticed some distance between us. I want you to know I care about you and value our connection, but I also respect your space. I'm here if and when you'd like to talk. This communicates care without pressure, clarity without control. It's a mature, emotionally responsible way to address discomfort without chasing. It's also crucial to be open to all outcomes. Sometimes, when someone pulls away, they do not return. This reality can be hard to accept, but resisting it leads to more pain. Practicing non-attachment doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you care deeply while also allowing people the freedom to choose. You understand that their decision to stay or go says more about where they are in life than it does about your worth. In this way, you protect your heart while remaining open. In education and leadership training, there's a powerful principle called holding space. To hold space means to remain present, supportive, and open, without rushing to fill the silence or fix what's uncomfortable. When someone is pulling away, one of the most compassionate things you can do is hold space for their process. That doesn't mean waiting around forever. It means allowing them the emotional room to come to their own understanding while you continue to grow and care for yourself. In the end, doing something different than chasing isn't about giving up. It's about choosing emotional integrity over insecurity. It's recognizing that your energy is valuable and should be invested in places where it's returned. It's about refusing to negotiate your value in the face of silence or withdrawal. And perhaps most importantly, it's about learning that connection, when it's real and mutual, doesn't require you to beg or prove. It requires presence, patience, and mutual effort. By choosing not to chase and instead choosing self-awareness, emotional regulation, and healthy boundaries, you demonstrate strength. You become someone who can love without losing themselves. And that is one of the most powerful things a person can learn, not just in relationships, but in life. Kindness is often misunderstood as weakness. In emotionally difficult moments, especially when someone is pulling away or treating us with indifference, it may feel unnatural or even unfair to respond with kindness. But in truth, kindness is not about being passive, naive, or submissive. It is a conscious, empowered choice to rise above emotional impulsiveness and respond with dignity, empathy, and respect. From an educational standpoint, kindness is a sign of emotional intelligence, maturity, and inner strength. It is not what you do when things are easy. It is what you choose when your ego wants to lash out. but your values remind you who you are. When someone pulls away, it's common to feel hurt. That hurt can quickly transform into anger, resentment, or defensiveness. You may feel tempted to mirror their behavior, ignore them, talk about them, shut down emotionally, or react with sarcasm or blame. But these reactions, though understandable, often damage your character more than they affect the other person. Kindness, by contrast, helps you maintain integrity. It allows you to express your feelings without aggression, to set boundaries without cruelty, and to walk away from what harms you without needing revenge. Educational psychology teaches us that people's behavior is often a reflection of their inner world, not of our worth. Someone pulling away may be struggling with stress, fear, guilt, or confusion. Their withdrawal may not be personal. It may be about where they are mentally or emotionally. Responding with kindness doesn't mean excusing bad behavior, but it does mean choosing not to retaliate. It means allowing someone the dignity of their own process, even when it's painful to witness. It means being rooted in your own values rather than being swayed by another person's emotional state. Kindness to everyone, especially in moments of tension, is also a demonstration of self-respect. When you choose kindness, you're saying, no matter how others behave, I decide who I am. This gives you emotional freedom. You are no longer bound to act from hurt or fear. You don't let bitterness write your story. Instead, you stand in emotional sovereignty, owning your behavior, even when someone else doesn't own theirs. That is real power. Moreover, kindness creates emotional safety. In relationships of all kinds, romantic, platonic, familial, people open up when they feel safe. If someone is pulling away because they are overwhelmed or unsure, harshness will not draw them closer. But consistent kindness, calm, firm, and sincere, can be a gentle reminder that they are safe with you, even if they're not ready to engage right now. This doesn't mean you sacrifice your boundaries or needs, but that you communicate them with care. For example, saying, I understand you need space, and I'm giving that to you, but I hope when you're ready we can talk, is far more powerful than, I guess you don't care anymore. Another point of educational value is that kindness is not limited to just how we treat others. It also applies to how we speak to and treat ourselves. When someone pulls away, we often internalize it. We may become unkind to ourselves, blaming ourselves, criticizing our worth, or replaying every interaction for what we could have done differently. But just as others deserve compassion for what they're going through, so do we. Self-kindness is essential. It means offering yourself the same grace you'd offer a close friend, reminding yourself that you are doing your best, that you are learning, and that you are still worthy, even when connections change. Kindness also keeps the door open for reconciliation. Even if the relationship cannot return to what it was, kindness ensures that you part ways with grace, not bitterness. This matters more than many people realize. Life is long and unpredictable, and the people who exit our lives today may reappear in different ways in the future. Ending things with kindness doesn't guarantee they will come back, but it does guarantee that if they do, you've preserved respect. And if they don't, you can walk away with peace, knowing you honored the connection to the best of your ability. In the broader picture, kindness to everyone shapes the emotional tone of our communities. Whether in friendships, workplaces, families, or romantic relationships, every act of kindness sets a tone. It says we can disagree, disconnect, and even grow apart, but we don't have to harm each other in the process. It models emotional responsibility. It teaches those around us that we can coexist with difference, distance, and discomfort, and still treat each other like human beings. This does not mean you never get angry, never feel hurt, or never set limits. Kindness includes boundaries. It says, I care about you, but I won't allow this behavior, or I'm stepping away to protect my peace. These are acts of kindness, both to yourself and to the other person, because they protect the emotional health of both parties. Kindness is not about staying silent in pain, it's about speaking from the heart rather than from the wound. In summary, choosing kindness, especially when someone pulls away, is not the easy choice, but it is the higher one. It invites healing where there could be harm, peace where there could be chaos, and growth where there could be resentment. It reminds us that we do not have to match the energy of others. We can stay rooted in who we are, even when others are unsure of who they are. And ultimately, being kind to everyone, regardless of the outcome, is a mark of true emotional strength.